What's going on, guys, and welcome to another episode of Smash JT. Today, I have the honor of speaking to Rob Wyatt, who is the system architect for quite a few consoles out there, and he is working on a new console right now called the Game Board. And I want to welcome Rob in on the phone because right now, apparently, they're having some internet issues with the windstorm. So the phone it is, and Rob, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the crowd here.
Hey everyone, I'm Rob Wyatt. I am CTO and founder of the Last Gameboard.
And what exactly is the Last Gameboard?
It is a new type of gaming platform where you can play games but with physical pieces. So we have the physical presence of the pieces. You can play on a digital table, and you can move your pieces around like you would on a traditional board game, and we know what piece is and we know where the piece is. So with that, you open it up to developers and you can make some interesting game mechanics.
So does that use like NFC, near field communication, or how does it communicate with the game board?
It's a bit of everything. We have a custom capacitance-based touchscreen, and we do a lot of manipulation of that. So that's how we know the position and the high-speed positioning of the pieces. And then we have a RFID, which is NFC compatible, but it's also more than NFC, which stores the data about the tag. There's been a lot of questions about if NFC or RFID is faster in the tag.
Okay. Now, the Last Game Board, it started a Kickstarter, and I understand it was funded in one day.
It was. It's actually still going. There's 20 odd days on the left.
Okay.
So it went live on 10/10, and it runs for a month. It was funded in a day, and we're kind of excited about that. The project's been going on in the R&D phase for about a year. We didn't want to come out with anything unless we knew we could do what we needed to do, and that's really all our technology is in the screen, what we call the sense screen, and that's where we have all of the radio communication and where we have all of the capacitance manipulation.
And from my research of the Last Game Board, it seems like there is an awful lot of tech that's packed into this tablet. Like, is it able to connect with other game boards next to it and make a bigger game board?
The board itself is a tablet form factor, but it's big. It's 16.5 by 16.5 inches, which is the size you need to call it a game board. If it's any smaller than that, it's just... And it's funny because we originally made 16 by 9 prototypes with commercially available hardware to the extent we could use it. Mm-hmm. And everybody, as soon as they saw it, was like, oh, it's a tablet. Why is it different to a tablet? Blah, blah, blah. And we had to keep going into the fact that, electronically, it's kind of like a tablet, but it's very different. And as soon as we went to the square form factor for the more realistic prototypes, those questions just went away, because now visually and mentally, it looks like a traditional board game. It's the same size, it's square, and there's no bias in it if it's square. If it's rectangular and there's 4 people sitting around it, 2 people have a disadvantage because they're on the short side.
Yeah.
Where if it's completely square, it's like a game board. You can sit around it and everyone has a fair view of the screen. All of my tech is pretty much in the screen. And the electronics is basically a high-end SoC. On the electronic side, it's very much like a tablet. It has all the usual things that a tablet would have. It's very much like a tablet. It's a high-end SoC. It has modern graphics. We have NFC. We have Bluetooth. We have all the usual things you would find in a tablet. But obviously our form factor is very different. And we do have technology in the edges of the case. So if you put multiple boards together, we can detect those boards. And if the particular application allows it, they can spread their application across all the boards as if it's one big screen. So if you have like 4 friends, all have boards, you could put them together and make a 32 by 32 board and play one game across the whole set of 4 tablets.
Now, will it be that every game will be expandable to that, or only certain games will utilize that function?
Every game has the option of doing that. It really depends on the game. Obviously, we have some mechanics which are more arcade-like play, where you can do, like, imagine a really simple example would be air hockey, where 2 people have bats and the pucks digital and you're bouncing it around the screen.
Yep.
Some of the arcade type play doesn't scale very well to bigger environments.
Right.
So it's really up to the developer as to what they want to do. If the developer wants to support it for any type of game, it is possible. But it really comes down to the developer and whether it makes sense for their content and how people interact with that content.
And it doesn't have to be 4. Could it be 2, like for air hockey, to make a rectangle?
Could be any number as long as it makes a rectangle or square.
Okay. That's really, really unique.
So you could do 8 in a line if you wanted to. If you wanted to do like shuffleboard, you could put like 8 in a line.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
Obviously, there are limits. We don't have enough prototypes right now to test what the limits are.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing 16 is probably a reasonable limit.
Okay.
For be a 4x4 or 2x8 or however you want to make up to 16 boards. It's probably arbitrary, but at some point we have to draw a line and go, yeah, it'll probably work, but it's such an extreme use case that let's not focus on it.
No, it seems like, I mean, you've been working on this for a while, like you said, and you have a ton of passion behind it. And it seems like something that definitely has a market for it. I could totally see this being successful in today's environment, which kind of leads me into a question. And this is up to you for how you want to answer it. But I'm sure a lot of my audience would be interested to hear directly from you how this got initially started and the elephant in the room. What happened with Atari VCS system situation over there, and if you could just give some insight to our viewers on what's going on with that and your dealings with that situation.
So I probably can't say a lot about what's going on with myself and Atari. I mean, the board is their last medium post is I state of the board. It does exist. Mm-hmm. And we've got them that far. Yeah, we do have some disputes going on, and that's really all I can say on the Atari front. But what I can say is the game board existed before I was involved with Atari.
Okay.
We go back further than that. So this has been in the background the whole time in the R&D phase. Like I said, we didn't want to mention anything about it until we knew it potentially could be a product. Yeah, we still have a lot of things to figure out on the game board, but we didn't even mention it kind of publicly until we knew that, the tech would work. If it's all put together in the correct way, this will work as we plan. And that's when we went public. I think Dean Takahashi was the first article to actually bring this out. And it was, that was kind of our launch to the public. All the way back, this has been in the works for about 18 months. We started off, we've got some working very crude prototypes. We are having custom capacitance screens made because they need to be custom for what we need to do. And because they're square, we are still in the manufacturing process. So we're setting up all these relationships with manufacturers and suppliers who can get us these custom and semi-custom parts that we need in order to be able to do this.
Now, do you feel some sort of extra motivation to ensure the success of this based off of your past history with Atari? Does that give you a little bit more, we got to make this work to show them that I know what I'm doing here?
No, I don't think it matters. I think Atari will do their thing and they'll be their product to their product. And as of right now, I have nothing to do with it. And they'll either use my stuff or they won't use my stuff. And that's entirely their choice. It's their platform.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens there.
Okay. And I won't keep digging. I know that's a situation that you can't really dive too much into, but I wanted to get as much as I could out of you out of that. But this game board situation is intriguing. I am very interested in it. Now, as far as what I see, what's that?
In what way does it intrigue you?
The way that it could change up family game nights. I'm thinking about my own personal situation. I got a wife and 2 kids, and we don't really play board games. And I bet
your kids play on iPads. And
they do.
Exactly.
And
we're coming into a world now where people don't play board games because they're not interactive. They don't have any feedback. It's just the only feedback you get is from the social interaction, which is what's being missed. So if you take your kids who are young and have grown up with iPads and tablets, then you give them this game board and you can play with it and you get all the social experience of a traditional game night and it's interactive. It kind of fills all their boxes that they need to have before they'll interact with a piece of technology.
Absolutely. And I could totally see this keeping their attention because I feel like my kids, I try my best to keep their attention with things, but they're always distracted so easily. So something like this would be right up their alley. As far as the pricing for it, let's talk about that. Now, as far as the pledging on the Kickstarter, I see it says $3.49 or more for a first edition or $4.49 for a special edition. Could you dive into some details on what people would be looking at as far as a price range and what they'd be getting if they were to decide to move forward with the purchase?
So our retail price is going to be around the $3.50 mark, and we've always aimed for that. Our business model doesn't really depend on us making money on the hardware, which gives you an interesting problem for Kickstarter, which we can get to later. The hardware Kickstarters are very fickle,
challenging.
Shall we say.
Yeah.
But yeah, our business model is not based on around making money on the hardware. We can't lose money on the hardware. We're not Sony or Microsoft in the PlayStation, Xbox model. But we don't need to make massive profits on the hardware. So if we can get the BOM cost down to be less, we'll reduce the cost of the hardware to make the initial purchase more attractive. And that's always going to be our goal. So if we can get, in 2 years, if we can get this thing down $100, we'll sell it $100 cheaper.
Wow.
It's really about the back-end services of our business model. So the subscriptions and the online purchases and the tags and the licensing and all of that is really what the business model's about, not about selling hardware.
Awesome. And what about the games? Who's going to be making the games for it? Do you have anyone signed on to do that? Is that coming from you?
We have some big names signed up that we can't yet announce. Hopefully in the next coming weeks we can announce these.
Okay.
But you'll be impressed with the list of games that we have. And we have about 30 confirmed developers right now that are signed up, committed to actually make games.
Wow.
So I think at launch we'll have over probably 100 games at launch, with spreading the spectrum from D&D type games all the way to arcade type play games.
Wow. And this is going to be very unique. Like, it's going to stand apart from tablets because of the features you can use with it. What about the battery? How's that going to work? What's your experience with the battery on it?
So we're kind of fortunate in the battery sense in that our case is huge. Because it's 16 by 16 inches.
Right.
So we have loads of room in the case. So battery life, we can make not an issue. Okay. Full stop. The issue is what effect does that have on the cost? And is it worth it? So our biggest power consumer by a long, long way is the screen.
Yeah.
So we can easily do a reasonable priced, reasonable physically sized battery and get 4 hours of average use. And you have to say average there because the screen power varies wildly. If it's displaying black or dark colors, then it takes a lot less power than if it's displaying white.
Yep.
So a full white screen, we're not going to probably aim for 4 hours of that sort of play.
Right.
4 hours of average intensity, average content, we can easily do. We could probably get design talks right now about potentially making the battery like an old-fashioned laptop type battery where you can just click it in and out.
That would be pretty
And then
sweet.
you can have user-replaceable batteries. Users can have multiple batteries.
Yep.
And we could, aftermarket, sell batteries of different sizes. So if you want a 10-hour battery, you can get a 10-hour battery. Nice. Or you can have 2 5-hour batteries.
Nice.
However you want to do it. The batteries themselves will be USB-C charge,
okay,
the same as the box itself is. So you don't need a second charger to charge your batteries. You can just plug your any USB-C charger into it. It'll charge it.
Nice. And as far as the release date, I see for the Kickstarter, it says October 2020. What about people that don't participate in the Kickstarter? Do you have an estimated delivery release date?
It's going to be around the same time. Kickstarter, okay, because they're our early backers and initial supporters, will get them first. But the commercial release, buy it in the store, buy it online, however that ends up working out, will be before the end of 2020. So the Kickstarters will get a month or two head start, but the end of 2020, it'll be commercially available wherever you want to buy it. And
it sounds like you haven't figured this out yet, but I figure I'll ask anyways. Do you know what stores this will be available in? Or if you don't know that, do you know what stores you'll be aiming for it to be available in?
We'd like it to be as available as possible, of course, that's the answer. But it's it's not easy talking, and I'm a tech person, so this is like kind of out of my area of expertise. But it's not easy talking to some of the big stores because there's potentially limited aftermarket sales, and I think Xbox and PlayStation are going to face this same problem too once they go completely digital. Like, why would Walmart sell a console that they're going to lose money on?
Right.
And there's nothing else to sell ever again. And there will be little bits to sell, cards, and potentially like tokens for games and tags and pieces. And it's a hard situation. So online will certainly be available, and there are some specialty stores which are gagging basically to get their hands on this thing.
Oh, I could imagine.
And in the long term, imagine take the 5-year plan. It would be nice if this thing's so popular that all board games just naturally come. Even if it's a cardboard board game, they just come with pieces that are game board activated. So it's just a regular game board piece, and you play it on a regular game. But if you take those pieces and put them on the game board, they also work there.
I like that idea.
So that would be the long-term plan, to be like the standard electronic piece that all game boards, if they're electronic or not, come with these tags built in because they're so cheap. In that case, then you've got a better story for the stores, because all the existing traditional board games they're already selling are compatible with this. And then it's more likely that they'll give it shop space.
And that kind of leads me into my next question. Any physical games planned for this, or is it strictly digital only?
Then, physical games. There are some games that are physical that will be the model that I just said, where they'll come, it's traditional physical game. They'll come with pieces that are for the game, but they also have the tags in them, so you can now transition your game to the game board.
Right, but not like a cartridge based like the Switch, where it just plugs into the side. Nothing like that will be going into this.
No, this is all completely digital.
Okay.
We do have external storage, and we're doing a hardware review kind of right now, and the result of that hardware review will be some form of additional storage. I believe it'll be potentially a high-speed SD. We could put an M2 SSD connector on the board.
But that's gonna cost. SSDs are expensive.
In the case and all of that. So the SSD, unless we can figure out how to get it externally accessible, it's a bit of a pain in the ass.
I could imagine.
It's easy to put on the board. It's not a big deal to get it on the board, and we can do NVMe, we can do SATA. It's not the end of the world, around which we do.
Right.
It's just the physical access to it, where an SD card just easy to click in, click out.
Yep.
We're really going through this process right now. So there's a fair amount of, there's 64 gigs of eMMC, which is a lot, but it's not a lot. Highly graphical.
What are you aiming for as far as memory storage on board default with the...
Right now, the default is 64 gigs of eMMC, which will hold the OS and basically like a phone.
Okay.
And 4 gigs of RAM. But I would personally like it to be 8 gigs of RAM, given the time frame that we're coming out in. But again, there's BOM costs and supplier costs, and it also indirectly goes back and changes the SoC. A lot of the mid-range SoCs don't have the ability to access more than 4 gigs of physical memory. Even though they're 64-bit chips, they can only access 4 gigs of actual physical RAM. So it would force us down a different path on the SoC side. It's not the end of the world. It's just a matter of going back and reevaluating the BOM. And a lot of the new SoCs, and this is actually a win, why it may be worth doing it, a lot of new SoCs use DDR4, where the older ones use DDR3. And DDR3 is a tiny bit cheaper, but it's coming out of its curve such that it's going to start to go up. Like if you buy DDR2 now, it's really expensive.
Okay.
So we have to time it right with the commodity pricing of commodity pieces. So it's not just, I'll pick this because it has good spin and that, and you've got to do the longevity of these parts and how they're going to be available in a year for the reasonable price.
Yeah.
And so all that plays in. So DDR4, if we use a modern SoC, a higher end SoC that only uses DDR4, it potentially is a win because DDR4 comes in much bigger physical packages. So you can get like 8 gigs in one chip.
Yeah.
Where if we did 8 gigs with DDR3, we'd have 32 chips or something like that, and just the cost of those packages and the testing and the mounting of those would be
A lot.
a problem, basically. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to go there. And you see this on like the old PlayStations too. Like take a PlayStation 4 apart. In there's a whole bank of memory chips on both sides of the board,
Yep.
simply because the packages density that we can get today weren't available then. So we have to pick an SoC that has the power. It'll definitely be ARM. It'll definitely be 64-bit, and there'll be A73 style cores. But there's a massive market of these chips out there. We have to basically pick one that, and the other thing, it has to be able to do basically 2K by 2K resolution, and on a GPU. So the power of the GPU is a driving factor in how we select the SoCs.
Okay.
And a lot of the other features that SoCs have, we don't really need. Potentially in the future they'd be useful, like a lot of LTE modems built in, and we'd rather not pay for a 4G or a 5G modem if we're not going to
Utilize it, right.
Utilize it.
Right.
So you've got to kind of weave your way through the market, and everyone from the Chinese manufacturers, Rockchip and the like, all the way to Samsung and Qualcomm, and even Nvidia, all have a huge array of SoCs for varying power, varying capabilities. It's a matter of picking one that makes sense for us. And that's kind of what this final design review is about.
And I could see just by watching the trailer here, and I'm going to be, during the video, I'll be showing everyone what I'm talking about, but I can see this being utilized for not just traditional board games, but not just traditional like D&D style mapping or anything like that, but also creating an entirely new genre of board games that can be used only on this console.
Yes, we've actually had a lot of questions come in about this, and I think our plan is to make some sort of game board creators kit where we give you all the tools, be they on the tablet itself or be they on PC, that allows you to design game boards and game board mechanics, and then you can 3D print your own physical pieces and stick the tags in them, and we'll give you tools to program the tags. And yeah, you can prototype your entire game board by itself. Even if you're going to make it in cardboard and a traditional game board, you could still prototype it on this platform. And because it's prototyped on there, it'll probably stay there.
Or you could even sell generic pieces that would just mark numbers for them to be able to use on the games they created. That sounds like an incredible proposition. Like, I used to make board games out of cardboard back in the day. Like, I had so much fun doing that and creating my own. And just the prospect of being able to do that digitally with an onboard package that comes with it, that's exciting. If that ends up coming to fruition, that would be amazing. That's
my goal, is to make it so people can make their own games. We had a lot of questions as well about not even physical presence games, of just, can we put 4 boards together and put a huge D&D map on it and just play D&D on the screen? We don't want any electronic interaction at all. We just want to use it as a big screen. And we had a lot of questions on that. So all of this will be incorporated into this maker's kit, whatever we end up calling it, whatever it ends up being. All of this ability, so you can play with physical pieces, you can just use it as a display, you can scan images, you can draw images. However you want it to work, this will all be there. And this plays into, for the D&D folks, this plays into the multiple screens too. If you can have one big map on 9 screens and then just play D&D on it with your own pieces, be it our pieces or not, just using it as a base display, not trying to get in the way of any sort of innovation. If someone wants to use it in a way that we haven't thought of, go for it. Our goal is to provide developers with a stack of tools. As to, this is how you connect boards, this is how you stretch across boards, this is how you read pieces, this is how you write pieces, this is how you detect where they are. We're going to give them a whole toolkit of SDKs and APIs, and how they put this together is entirely up to them. So I can envision mechanics that we've not even thought of coming out of this.
Now, I am looking at a GIF right now where it's showing a hand and a multi-touch. Can you talk about a little bit of the technology as far as like how many fingers can touch it at once, how it senses that, and the information on all that touchscreen data?
So I don't want to go into too many details because that's our IP, but we effectively have a custom PCAP controller, and we do a lot of data modeling on the actual analog data coming from the touchscreen. So, and that's really where our tech is. So we're not limited to any number of touches like a traditional touchscreen is. You can put 30 fingers on it and we can detect them all.
Wow.
There is no limit. I mean, all we're seeing is think of it as an image of it's a grid of capacitance values, and everything you do to the screen changes these capacitance values. So you can put things on the screen, you can touch the screen, and they all interact with the way that the capacitance of the screen works in different ways. So a traditional touchscreen controller spends a lot of time filtering out what they would call noise because it's something you left on the screen, or there's a drop of water on the screen,
right,
or whatever it may be. And they're looking for physical finger touches, and they do a lot of cleanup of the data to get those touches. And they tend to go slower the more touches you have because they're doing a lot of work for each touch point of tracking it and hysteresis across frames to make sure it's still there and all of this. So as they get more touches, they tend to slow down.
Yeah.
When you look at just the raw data and you have a custom controller, which allows you to get to this level of data without any filtering at all the processing we do is in software. So we can change it as we go. So the touchscreen will get better over time.
Okay.
Once you see the raw data, you realize that there's a lot of things you can detect. Now, it's hard to detect because it's just a blip in the data. With modern data analysis and machine learning type tools, you can detect all sorts of things. Like you can put an object on the screen and let it go. And even if you're not touching it, we still know it's there.
Right.
Which is a lot of our tech. So a lot of our tech is actually software, not hardware.
I could see why.
Yeah, but we need the hardware
in order to use the software.
That sort of data, which is good because it means it's hard for someone to copy us. Because unless they make these custom controllers, they're going to have a hard time. You can do something similar with a traditional touchscreen. Yep. It's just clunky. Our original prototype was just that.
Right.
And it's just clunky. It doesn't work. And you're kind of forcing it to work. Whereas once you get to the actual core data, like solve the problem that needs solving, you can get like an amazing interface. So regular finger touch is just part of the decoding of the capacitance. And we'll feed that into the Android stack like a regular touch sensor would, but it'll all be in software.
But also the good thing to this is it's hard to duplicate because of that technology. You wouldn't be able to just copy this and put it on an iPad because it just wouldn't transfer. It'd be clunky. It wouldn't work well.
Like an iPad can't get, and it probably can at the lowest level. I mean, Apple have got enough swag to do whatever the hell they want.
Right.
But at the lowest level, an iPad may not be able to get the type of data that we have, and it probably doesn't want it.
Right.
So, but at the application level, no, there's no way you get this level of data from the touchscreen. And our touchscreen is incredibly high resolution too. So the standard finger touch screen that you'd have in a tablet, no matter how high end the tablet is nowhere near the resolution of our screen.
And just to circle back on another question earlier about the memory, because we were talking about making your own games and saving things. Will it have external memory like an SD card slot to share? Or will it go online?
That was what I was getting at with the SD. With the design review of the M2 slot or the SD slot.
Oh, the SD slot. Okay, I misheard that.
So it'll either have a micro SD slot on the outside of the case where you can stick a 128 gig card in it, or if we can figure out how to do the ID, it'll have an M2 slot on the board where you can stick an SSD and use that as storage. The SD might be more useful because you can take it out and share it and things like that.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at with the sharing and things like that.
Yeah. And there's also the cloud too, where part of your subscription is to have some cloud storage so you can store your games that you designed in the cloud. But it's your data. We don't want to own it, really. If you want to store it on an SD card, store it on an SD card. We want to give you the best experience we can give you. We don't want you to have to jump through hoops because we want your data or we want this.
Right.
We're making you a game board to play games on. It's meant to be fun, and we don't want the technology to get in the way. Best, we've succeeded if you play a game and you go, that was cool, and you didn't have to think about fighting the technology for the sake of playing the game. If you have to fight it, then it's not working.
Right, and then you're not going to want to come back to it.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the subscription, and I see how some of these, it's included, or 3 months, things like that. Will a subscription be required with this, or is it completely optional?
Completely optional.
Okay.
And there are 2 levels of subscription that you can do. You don't need any of them. You can buy games outright from the store like you can on an iPad, put them on the device and play.
Okay.
Now, if you want to play online or you want to play with your friends, or if it's a game that requires an online presence, for example, then you have to have the minimum subscription, which is basically just server access. And we do pretty much like Xbox does. The basic thing is you get your friends lists, you get your connections, you can play online and all of that. That's the most basic subscription. And in that model, you own the games.
Okay.
We, at the higher level subscription, all the games are available to play in a Netflix type model.
Okay.
So the games, they're not streamed. You actually download them and you play them locally as if you had bought them.
Okay.
But every game is available. And we went through the ringer on how to do the pricing of the subscription and how do you pay developers. There's no, if you do this, the Spotify model, where you get a few pennies per minute of play or something like, why would anybody build a game? I mean, Spotify is only viable because there's 50 years of history of titles.
Right.
If there were no history of titles for music, no one would make music with the money that Spotify's paying them.
Right.
So,
good point.
it's like, how do you fix that?
Right.
So we came up with this idea where you can own games or you could stream them. So if you pay the full subscription, you get access to everything. And all games are available to download. What we do is we take the cost of the basic subscription off the high price subscription. So say these numbers are made up. Say it's $20 for the full price and it's $5 for the basic. So on every full price subscription, there's 15 spare dollars because we take the $5 out for the basic, which covers the servers and all of that. There's $15 left. That $15 we divide equally into the games you played yourself. So basically, we take all the 15-minute chunks that you played a game throughout the month, we normalize that, and we divide it by the $15. And that's exactly how much money each developer gets from each player.
That seems fair.
So it means developers could make an awful lot of money. Even if there's 1 million players doing this, it's $15 million a month that could get split between a very small number of developers. If you're in top 10 of the charts, then there's a good chance your game's being played quite a lot. And there's also a good incentive for developers to keep modifying, updating their games to keep them relevant, which makes the content and the experience on the board better. So, and the developers will know straight away if their game's dropping out of favor, because it will directly affect how much money they make from the people who play it. And I think that's completely fair, because some people are going to like arcade games and some people are going to like D&D games. And it's whatever games you play, you're paying a section of your subscription fee to that developer. And if you play one game all month, that one developer gets your entire subscription fee.
Wow. And it uses, from what I understand, Unity and Unreal Engine for developers?
All totally native. If you want to write native apps, you're more than welcome to.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we work with Unity and Unreal of extensions. It's just a modified version of Android. So there is native. You can build an APK yourself and use Java or C and use the native SDK. I mean, ultimately, we only create really the native SDK, and then that's wrapped into Unreal and it's wrapped in C# to become a Unity extension.
Wow.
But the base SDK is always available if you want to write native code.
Nice. Okay. I was going to say one thing I just noticed too is you said it's going to have Bluetooth, and I see some of the videos here where they're using iPhones and things to interact with it. I could see tons of different games possibilities like Scrabble.
We didn't even talk about the private screens. Let's take a detour talk about private screens. Let's also talk about dice. There's two other big sections which we didn't even touch on.
Okay.
And again, I have plenty of time.
Okay.
So the private screens are great because it's a place where it's a private screen. So you could play poker and you could have your cards, your digital cards on your screen. Or you could play Catan and have your resources on your screen. Or play Yahtzee and have your dice or whatever game you want to be. It's a way to have a private view of something that you need for the game. Like in most games, you have cards where you hold them dear to yourself. How do you do that on a public screen? You do that through a private screen. So There'll be a Game Board app for Android and iOS where you can install that, and when you install a game on the Game Board, part of that install is a blob of data which gets sent to the mobile device. Okay. So it's only one app you need on your mobile device, and it's basically a mini game engine. And
does it connect via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, or how would it interact?
It connects via Wi-Fi. They are all on the same network, and this goes for multiple boards too. If you're playing with multiple boards, you basically have a session ID to that session, and you can be on different networks because it's all done through the cloud. So your phone can be on the cell network, and your Game Board can be on Wi-Fi, and as long as they connect to the same session, which is cloud-based, they can communicate.
That's smart.
So you don't have to be on the same Wi-Fi network. If you are, it still works. Okay. But basically, it's all cloud-based, and the reason we do it in the cloud is we want this to be used offline. If you've got a cabin in the woods and you want to play games, having a cloud subscription is not going to do much. So the idea that everything that needs the cloud can be done without the cloud.
Gotcha.
In the woods, and you want to connect your phone, then the Game Board will become a Wi-Fi host, and you just connect directly to the Game Board.
That's very smart. Sounds like you thought of everything with this thing.
Yes. Right now, the big one is dice, and we went through a lot for dice.
That's kind of the most important part of a ton of games, so I could see why.
Yeah, and so there's two when it comes to dice. There's the casual players who have game night at the house, and you've got to keep that experience.
Yep.
The hardcore gamers are the polar opposite. They view dice as no more than a way to randomize the game, and if they didn't have to deal with them, they wouldn't.
Right.
So obviously, polar opposite. How do you do both? So we say that every game that needs dice has to build the dice into the board game, the base board.
Okay.
So you people who don't want to deal with dice can just hit a button and they get a random dice, and it's a digital dice I should get on an iPad today.
Right.
The second one is you can have the dice on your phone. On part of the private screen app is a dice system, and you can basically shake your phone, and you can kind of just cast the dice onto the table when you stop shaking your phone, and you kind of throw it towards the table.
Yeah.
The IMUs in the phone detect that, and it rolls the dice onto the public game board.
And I'm watching a GIF of that right now around the table with pizzas and beer.
So it's kind of fun because you still get the act of shaking the dice, and everyone still knows it's your turn.
Yep.
And you don't ever lose dice.
And you don't lose dice, and you don't knock over pieces on the table.
Yeah, exactly. So they're the two digital dice models that every game will provide.
Okay.
So then we get into real dice. So we have all this sense technology and blah, blah, blah. Why don't we just make a dice? Okay, so we did. And it's very hard to make land on a 16-inch piece of glass.
Yes.
And it's incredibly frustrating. It skids off, and if it's not on the glass, we can't detect it. Right. So it skids off and falls on the floor like real dice do. And it's like, that's not going to be a user experience anyone's going to want to go through.
Right.
So that very quickly became, let's not do that.
Okay.
So we looked at Bluetooth. Let's do a Bluetooth dice. And people are making Bluetooth dice, and we will work with those companies to make sure they work with the Game Board. But we're not going to make a Bluetooth dice because other people are. And the hard part about making a Bluetooth dice is you've got to cram a lot of electronics into this dice. And is it battery powered? Is it not battery powered? Is it charged? And the hard thing about the dice is
evenly
how do you
weighted.
keep it balanced?
Evenly weighted, yeah. I was just going to say,
if you just ram electronics in a dice, you've just made a loaded dice, depending on how you put it in.
Yep.
So then you get into the even more technical issues. Okay, let's say we make the dice with a little button cell battery. What if you change the battery and it's a different weight? You've loaded the dice, diagonal corners, so no matter which way you put the dice in the charger, it always touches two diagonal corners and it'll charge.
Yep.
Nice, convenient, and easy, but now there's a charger. And what if the dice isn't charged? What if you're playing Yahtzee and there's 5 dices, and they're probably going to be $30 each because they've got so much electronics in them.
Right.
That's $150 for dice. People pay this, but it's starting to get into the realm of people are going to do it for special occasions, and they're not going to do it for everyday dice.
Right.
So if third party truth dice, we'll work with them, and they work like regular dice. You just throw them, and if they skid off and land on the floor, we still know which way around they're facing.
Gotcha.
How about
an option?
There's too many technical issues to solve with the digital dice.
Well, I was going to say,
approach for dice.
Let me guess. Real dice that you just enter the number in after you roll?
No.
Okay.
That's way too crude. Although it's a good idea. No, but that's an option, I guess. But it's kind of clunky. We're trying to avoid clunkiness.
Right.
So the fourth option is we are making a dice ball, like a dice tower, that has a camera in the bottom. And if you roll the dice, it uses machine vision to look at the bottom side of the dice. And by now, we know what the top side is. And then if people make custom dice, then they have kids' games with animals on the sides of the dice instead of dots or numbers, then you can just provide us with the train data, and we'll train the vision system to detect your dice.
Now, would that be like
it'll work for any dice?
That tower would be a separate item next to it type thing?
It'll come afterwards, yeah. We're concentrating on the game board right now. We have some R&D into this, and we have some working prototypes. Same for cards, too. We can read cards with the camera.
Wow.
And so we're definitely going to go down the machine vision path to detect some of the more social things that you do with board games that are difficult to do any other way.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes for cards, it goes for dice. Again, on the dice thing, we can do anything from D4 to D20. We can do custom dice. We can do random dice as long as you tell us what the pattern of the numbers is. And same for cards. We can read cards the same way. We also looked at some experimental tech of where you could potentially use the phone on your camera as an above phone, sitting above the game board, so it can see what's going on and do some machine vision that way. It's not terribly convenient. If we can come up with a way to utilize it, we'll probably do something with it. But right now, it's just pure R&D.
Right. And I can see a lot of issues arising just off the top with that. But refining it might perfect it eventually.
Yeah, exactly. And there are some subtle use cases where it may be useful. Like maybe someone has their own expensive dice tower that they want to use and doesn't have a camera in it. So maybe if you can make a clip that clips on your phone onto it, so it can see what's going on in the dice tower, then it can use machine vision and you can use your existing dice tower for the hardcore gamers. So there are some use cases which are not clunky, but the general thing of having a camera above the game board and keeping it there while people sitting around the game board is clunky at best. I mean, if you're Vegas and you've got cameras in the roof, no big deal. But if you're in your living room, how do you get a camera above the game board at a reasonable distance? Blah, blah,
That's
blah.
high enough quality to pick it up and all that. Yeah,
it's just not good. There are certain use cases, like I said, the dice towers, and there are a few others, but it's really on a case-by-case basis of, like, could this or couldn't it be solved by machine vision? But the goal right now is to get the game board out and to get the dice working of all of the four forms that we talked about. So our first additional accessory for this will be the dice bowl. Gotcha.
It sounds like you have an incredible amount of R&D and passion behind this project. I can just hear it flowing off you. Like there's nothing that I've asked you where you're like, oh, I don't know. Like you're like, no, we've done this, and this. We've
tried everything. I mean, we really do want to be on the ball. I mean, if I don't know, then, I mean, the people do ask questions where I don't know the answer, and I'm the first to admit it. Yeah. But it's, we've been through a lot with this. I've thought about pretty much every use case that there is, and it's getting to the point where not many people ask things that we haven't thought of right now. But every now and then, someone does show up. The dice tower, my existing dice tower was a question I'd never even considered, and that's where having the R&D in the background, you're like, oh, you know what, we played around with this machine vision stuff.
Right.
We didn't do it because of mounts and all that. It's like in a dice tower, it would kind of work. So, and hopefully we can work with dice tower manufacturers who are open to putting a camera in them. So maybe you can buy them in the future that have a camera built in, or at least have a camera mount built in.
Right.
So there's many things we could do, many avenues we can pursue to get traditional gaming to be more digital, and that's across the board, whether it be cards, dice, players, physical pieces, whatever it may be. And our goal is to digitize all of this.
And you will, I was going to say digitize it, like you could still like play the checkers and chess without having to set up all the pieces. You can just use your finger to slide the board.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, exactly. If you're in the back of a car and you want to play with your brother and sisters, want to play on the back seat, and you don't want to lose the pieces, yeah, you can just do digital pieces. You don't need the physical pieces.
Or like a Connect 4 or something like that too.
Yeah, you play Connect 4. All these games are possible. I mean, any board game you could play on an iPad, you can play on this if you don't use physical pieces. It's no different to any other tablet. It's just bigger and way more fun to play because you can play Connect 4 at real size.
And way more versatile.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, honestly, like I've done research on this, but hearing you talk about it, it gets me kind of hyped for it. And I'm being 100% truthful. Like, it looked pretty cool, but I'm like, okay, well, you know, anytime there's new tech, there's always that air of caution because I feel like a lot of consumers have been burned in the past with jumping on board something when it's brand new. But
so that gets into my Kickstarter story of like why I was I'm still not. We did the Kickstarter for market validation. We didn't do it really to raise
the funds.
Raise funds, and there's a huge gotcha with raising funds for hardware projects on Kickstarter, and it pretty much means that hardware projects will never work. And the reason for that is a lot of these projects don't have additional funding, while we do. So imagine what happens if we sell 1,000 boards at $350. As of today, we have, and we're not making any money on the hardware at all, so there's no margin in that.
Right.
So as of today, we have 1,000 boards at $350. So say we have $350,000. That's money we can spend right now and develop the product.
Right.
So we spend that money right now and we develop the product. And in a year, we have to ship 1,000 boards, which are going to cost us $350 each.
Yep.
So we need the $350,000, which we had a year ago. We need it today. Otherwise, we can't do the manufacturing. We can't satisfy the supplier BOM costs, etc., etc. Which is why a lot of hardware products get developed but never get manufactured because they run out of money at the end. Because they spent the money. And now, if your hardware is being sold at a massive margin, if it only costs $50 to make and you're selling it for $500, then your actual liability is only $50 per.
Right, but that's rare.
So
that's rare.
That is rare in hardware because most hardware today is a way in to make software work.
Yep.
And so hardware inherently has little value. Outside what it costs, which is why we're selling it for what it costs. Kickstarter is like, you're doing us a better favor by buying a position in line than you are buying actual hardware.
Right. I can see why.
If you buy a position in line, we can deal with that later.
Well, that's exactly the concern a lot of people have with the VCS right now.
So if everyone should have for any hardware project on Kickstarter, then you are in a huge hole for yourself. If you're doing a hardware Kickstarter, you have to be able to fund it externally and use the Kickstarter as a bonus or use it as a market validation tool. You can't be using it to raise funds in order to develop the product.
What are your thoughts on Indiegogo?
Let's not.
Just curious.
It's okay. It seems like there's a much higher failure rate on Indiegogo. We pick Kickstarter not because it's better. It's
well, you need the working prototype.
You need a working prototype, and a lot of board gamers tend to Kickstarter more than Indiegogo. We're not ruling out going to Indiegogo in the future. It really depends on customers, and right now our customers are far more concentrated on Kickstarter than they are on Indiegogo.
Yeah,
and that's just because of the type of product that it is. So again, we're not writing Indiegogo off. It's because of its history and the way it funds things. I would rather have an actual final form working prototype with developer games running to basically we're 3/4 of the way down the path to launching. At that point, we could do an Indiegogo just to round it out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do an Indiegogo at this point.
Right. There's definitely a stigma behind it, but I think if you have a successful Kickstarter, that changes it. So, yeah. No, I know you're extremely busy and you've already spent a ton of time with me. I can't thank you enough, Rob. Do you want to leave the audience with any more information that we didn't cover in this, that I didn't ask you, that you'd like them to know about with this game board, and any fun little tidbits about it?
No, I think you covered most things. I think the tidbit I wanted to give you was the subscription model stuff, and And the design review of like the hardware that we've announced so far may not be exactly what we ship. It'll be certainly, it won't be any worse,
Right.
but it could be a lot better. And that's the design review that's going on right now.
Rob, I can't thank you enough for taking the time today and informing everyone about this game board. And like I said, I'm excited about it, and I truly hope for all the success in the world for you with it, because I can tell all the passion and brains are behind this project. And I mean, if people don't even know you, maybe that you are the system architect behind the original Xbox. I mean, you worked on the Atari VCS. You've done a ton of other things in addition to that, and I think this has a high likelihood of success based off of just that alone.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for your time, Rob. I really appreciate it.
Okay, speak soon. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.